everybody. Welcome. Thank you all so much for joining us. This is our discussion on mastering the juggle, event planning without burnout. As we come together this month to celebrate National Wellness Month, we're excited to embark on a journey that goes beyond event organizing, diving into what it takes to lead a balanced and harmonious life. Today, our experts are here to equip you with the tips and tools that will resonate in all aspects of your life. Tools that will empower you to conquer challenges, maintain equilibrium, and beat burnout. I'm Cassie. I'm the Director of Marketing at Expo Pass, and I'll be the moderator today for this conversation. If you haven't joined our webinars before or heard of Expo Pass, I'll just tell you a little bit about us. We are an event technology platform designed for event organizers like you to help you seamlessly plan, track, and organize events of all kind. We have a bunch of amazing features like on-demand badge printing, lead retrieval, and more. If you'd like to learn more about us, we'll drop a link in the chat, so feel free to check that out. Before we start, just a couple quick things I'd like to go over. Today's panel is a discussion, and we'd love you to be a part of it. So please use the chat and to ask questions. There's also a Q&A box, which you can ask anonymously if you'd like to do it that way as well. We'll be having some poll questions, so look out for those. We'd love you to participate. In the chat box, you'll see Lauren. She is on our Expo Pass team, and she'll be dropping some valuable resources and links in the chat throughout the discussion as well to help answer any questions that might come up in there. If anyone is wondering, yes, we are recording. So the session will be available on demand shortly after it's over. And anyone who is seeking CECs can earn 1 credit hour for attending from the Event Industry Council. So today, all of our speakers are part of the Burnout panel, and that's a group of experts from diverse backgrounds that have different knowledge and experience to help prevent and address the glaring issues of burnout for leaders and their teams. We're dropping a link to that Burnout panel's LinkedIn page in the chat, and there's just a ton of great pre-recorded resources. They do other events in there as well, so I definitely strongly recommend on checking that out. So I'd like to start introducing our burnout speakers. First, we have Aileen Axmeyer. Aileen is a workplace wellness speaker and career coach who helps exhausted professionals restore their energy, feel their best, and do what they love. For over 15 years, she's helped thousands of people manage their stress and has presented to large global groups. She partners with organizations at conferences with event managers to create customized wellness workshops that are tailored to their unique needs for the audience. Welcome, Aileen. Thank you for being here. And next up, we have Dr. Sharon Grossman. Sharon is an international keynote speaker and workshop leader who teaches organizations how to keep their employees happier working for them versus the competition. Through her signature talks on managing stress and overcoming resentment, Sharon equips her audience with practical tools and strategies to navigate challenges of modern life. Her insights are grounded in cutting-edge research, neuroscience, and emotional intelligence. Thank you for being here, Sharon. And now I'd like to introduce Vanessa Zami, the business defibrillator. Vanessa is a consultant, a professor, a speaker, a best-selling author, and she is emboldening women nationwide to lead prosperous community enterprises. She shares business growth techniques, tools, tips, so business owners can experience immediate improvements in their cash flow and stress levels. Her background includes management science and an engineering degree from Stanford University, and strategic leadership roles at Fortune 500 companies. Thank you all so much for being here. I'm really excited to have you and all of your expertise. And yeah, let's dive into it. We got a bunch of questions to get through, and I'm sure we'll have a lot more coming up in the chat. But to kick it off, Aileen, what is burnout and how can you identify it?
Thank you, Cassie. Excited to be here. So we've probably all heard this word more in the last few years than we have in our entire lives. So I think this is a great starting point for us to make sure we really get a clear sense of what we're talking about when it comes to burnout. Because sometimes this term can be tossed around in a similar way as stress, and they are related, but they're also different. So the term burnout originally came from the 1970s. There's a psychologist in the US, Herbert Freudenberger, and this first was focused on just what came from the workplace, but now we know burnout is not isolated to something that we experience at work. This can come from all areas of life, and it's really this chronic stressed state that creates that burnout. So there's three criteria that we need to kind of meet to move into what's categorized as real burnout. So this is emotional exhaustion, which is pretty self-explanatory there. Depersonalization, and this is this sense of, you might be a more sympathetic, empathetic person, but you start to notice that you have less of that capacity, or you still care about people, but there's a very clear difference between your normal level of that connectivity and what you're experiencing today. And the third criteria is a decreased sense of accomplishment. And this is twofold. One part of this is this sense of, why even bother? What difference is this action gonna make anyway? Or we're actually noticing a decrease in our output. You might feel like you're still working really hard, but just not making as much of an impact or making as many strides as usual. So those are the three criteria. I think my colleague Vanessa is going to talk a little bit more about the signs and things to look out for. So I will wrap it up with that.
Thank you,
Thank you,
Aileen. Yeah, but
Aileen.
yeah, thank you. And say, Vanessa, yeah, if you can dive deeper into some warning signs that people can look out for when they're approaching burnout.
Yeah, happy to. I like to approach this from a practical perspective. So those in the audience, you can see, okay, does this apply to me? Because I'm sure there are a lot of overachievers here who, like, I'm not exhausted. I'm fine. I'm good. It's okay. And at the end of the day, yes, exhaustion, as Aileen mentioned, is one of those warning signs. But what does that look like, practically speaking? If you have, if you're not prone to dark circles and you have dark circles at least 10 days in a row, right? If you're in your bed at your email at 10 p.m. Now, mind you, if there's an event tomorrow, 7 a.m., booths open, breakfast is at 8, speakers come at 9 a.m., the keynote speaker is emailing you at 10 p.m., okay, you respond to that email. But if it's 4 weeks before an event and it's 10 p.m. and you're in bed, there's no reason for you to be answering that email. Okay, we're going to talk about even more things about what more signs there are. Procrastination. So let's say you are finding yourself doing things at the last minute. You used to be someone who, you had things organized, you had them scheduled, but now you find yourself 2 minutes before, oh, wait, I got to do this thing. Oh my gosh. What's happening? Or if you find yourself some of you may be working remotely, some of you may be in the office or doing a hybrid, but you come home from work and all you feel is this sense of, I just want to go on the couch and turn on this TV and be a vegetable. But then maybe you're not able to do that because you have 50 million other things to do around the house. That are some warning signs that you are either approaching burnout or you are already there. And someone that put in the chat was the first element of burnout, the exhaustion. Yeah, so that's what Aileen was mentioning, the exhaustion, the emotional exhaustion. And so it's that idea of just, it's that constant state of, I'm just going to figure it out. I'll make this work. Yeah. And we'll go into more strategies. So here's have more strategies in there. But yes, I'll end it there. We have a lot more to talk about.
Awesome. I say some of those resonated with me. I don't think I'm at a burnout stage professionally, but personally, I feel like some of those things you said, I'm feeling, especially the want to sit on the couch, watch TV, million other things to do around the house. So I would imagine that resonates with a lot of people. And to kind of see where everyone's at, I'm going to throw a poll up here. Just kind of asking everyone, have you ever experienced burnout? This question specifically, like in your career, everything's anonymous here too. The answers are just yes, I currently am, help me, or no. Just kind of give us a good idea to direct our questions. So as everyone is filling that out, we will dive into the next question here, which I'm going to hand over to Sharon. And how do you strike that balance between the demands of planning events and anything you're doing career-wise and then your own well-being?
Well, thank you so much for that question. And I think it's an important one because whatever it is that you do for a living, you're going to probably be spending more time on that than on anything else. And yet you still have the other side of the equation, which is your personal life, your relationships, your health, all these other things. And we often find ourselves in a situation where we tell ourselves the reason why we're not spending more time on ourselves, on our health, on our relationships, is because we don't have enough time. But the truth is that we're kind of going about it backwards. And so what I always propose is that you figure out exactly what it is that you have to accomplish for your own personal goals, whether it's I have to go to the gym a couple times a week, or I want to spend some time with my kids. You have to figure those things out first and then plan the rest of your life around those things. The reason why that's so important is because we often say, well, I really don't have time to fill in the blank, meditate, exercise, whatever it is. And I'll do it when I have more time. And like, when was the last time you had extra time? Right? Like, that doesn't happen. And usually when we get to that point, if we ever get there, we're not organized. We don't remember what we said. So we'll waste that time away. I know I did that when I was home from maternity leave and I had nothing to do but be with my infant who slept half the time. And I was like, oh, I'm going to get all this stuff done. And I get like nothing done in 3 months. So I really encourage you to, whatever it is that's really important for you, to make sure that you schedule that ahead of time so that you know when it's going to get done.
That's some great advice. I am recently a new mother, and exactly what you just said about maternity leave and having a list of things I'm going to get done. Still
Doesn't
trying to do some of
happen.
those things 8 months later, but maybe one day. But kind of elaborating on that a bit. So what advice could you give to people who are feeling guilty though about taking some time for themselves, or even having that fear of missing out on something if they take 10 minutes to meditate or go get a manicure or whatever it might be?
Great question. So I would say with regards to guilt, it really is about a thought in your brain. So you're usually telling yourself something along the lines of, why should I spend this time on getting my nails done when I could be helping someone else? I should be helping someone else. And so you're kind of guilting yourself into doing something that doesn't involve you. Again, putting yourself on the back burner. And I think that kind of thinking highlights a belief, a deeper kind of a thought, right? Which is that my needs don't matter as much as other people's. So you want to really check yourself around that and ask yourself, like, how important do I really believe I am? How much am I putting like my needs ahead of the game? Because we all know that when you put everybody else's needs first, that's when you burn out, right? So I with guilt, I would definitely say look at the thinking that is like around the shoulds about what it means, and you'll kind of get there. With regards to FOMO, I always like to flip things upside down. So I would say to you, yes, there's always a trade-off. So if you're going to be meditating, you're not going to be able to, AKA, like, get more work done. However, what are you missing out on by not meditating and just doing work? Right. So there's always something that you miss out on, but that's not the thing to focus on. It's like, what is your actual goal? Do you want to be a more balanced person? Do you want to have better health, better mental health? Then you're going to spend those 10 minutes on yourself and not get too caught up in what you could be doing outside.
I want to just piggyback on that for a second too, because I think Sharon shared so many good nuggets in there. There's an excellent book called Atomic Habits by James Clear. Highly recommend it. I talk about it probably every day. And one of the things he talks about is kind of having an identity-based driver to any behavior change. So if you're stuck in that cycle of feeling guilty, putting yourself at the bottom of your to-do list, all of what Sharon said is so important, but it can be really challenging to change that pattern. First step is awareness, like Sharon said, but then the change is think about who who do you want to be and what behaviors support that? So do you want to be a person? So say you have kiddos, like Cassie was saying, who models for their children. Yes, I matter, my health matters, my mental health matters, all of that, and then take action that supports that. So getting clear on like your values and also, yeah, that identity-based goal for how you want to live your life, and then seeing how your actions do or don't line up with those can really be supportive of this kind of change.
And just to further go along this line, Adam Grant is somebody who said about identity that your identity is about the beliefs that you hold, not about the values that you hold, not the beliefs. So that's how you can separate the things that you believe that maybe are getting you into trouble, like that faulty thinking that creates guilt, and what is it that you truly value, and building your life and your identity around that.
That's all such great information for everyone here. Awesome. It looks like we got a question in our chat, reading this here, or someone sharing that early in their career, let's see, burnout from being the team catch-all. Ooh, that's never fun, doing everything. And after 15 years in event management, they're trying to figure out if burnout from the industry and overall work in general. And it looks like an injury. That's definitely no fun. So that's gonna put a damper in that for sure. But it looks like that you're walking away getting some good tips for this. So we're glad that we're already giving some great information to help you all out. And if you all have any specific questions too, again, please throw them in the chat, please throw them in the Q&A. And I'm gonna put in here, share the results from our first poll too. So just so you know that you're not alone, it looks like 70% of our attendees here have experienced burnout at some point, and another 25% currently are. And then there's the lucky 6% of you that have had some good stress-free work going on. And
Can I
I'm
share
going
the
to ask,
source for that question in the chat?
Yeah, go ahead, please.
Part of what they said is I want to walk away from today's conversation understanding if I need to be planning a transition strategy to a different job or industry, or you're at this pivot point. Is it just the roles you've had, or is it the industry at large? So a resource for that, one of the most popular elective classes ever at Stanford is called Designing Your Life. And so basically it's all these different strategies to think about what matters to you, what you want your work and your life to look like, and getting outside the box in terms of how you think about it. So they actually then realized this was so popular, they wanted to create access to this for people outside of Stanford. So then they created a book. Now, fast forward, they're offering it as a self-paced online course for free. Highly recommend checking that out. If you just Google Designing Your Life course, I believe it's on edX right now. It can be a nice way to just get outside of your own head. Friends and family can be helpful for thinking about this, but it's going to give you some tools to think about and suss out, is this just, is it my values have shifted and I want my work to shift? And it'll give you a framework for making that decision of whether or not it's transition time. So I wanted to just answer that specific question.
Thank you.
And I want to add to that because what Davia is in it. So what Davia mentioned there about, four herniated discs in my neck, it brings up another point about, what is a sign of burnout, a warning sign of burnout. And what ends up happening a lot is that sometimes the physical ends up manifesting itself. The internal ends up manifesting itself as a physical attribute. And so if you're finding yourself where you are constantly having health problems, like for example, when I was in the corporate space, I was in consulting, doing strategy. At some point in time, I remember there was this season where I would travel around and I would feel this thing, this blood vein in my heart would like stop, or it would like pitter patter, just a lot more than it needs to be. And I would go to the hospital and they would do the EKG. They did all this stuff, said, no, you're fine. Everything looks great. There's nothing wrong. But then I would go through the day and again, I felt like my heart just stopped for a second. I'm just going through regular moments, just something is wrong. But the health system says nothing is wrong. That's usually a sign that is a form of stress, impending burnout. Like your body's literally telling you there is something wrong here. And for some, it might be changing your careers. For some, it might just mean taking a break from your current career, whether that be a sabbatical and then going back to it. But it's really looking at evaluating, if you're a Davi or if you're someone else in that similar position, where it's looking at what else, taking a step back and saying, okay, what do I actually need to have happen during the days for me to feel better about myself? And looking at, or not even better about yourself, but even just feel good in general. What are things that you've done in the past? Maybe you used to enjoy swimming and you haven't done that in a while. You used to enjoy walking around the block, but you haven't done that in a while. You used to enjoy date nights, but you haven't done that in a while. And so looking at what are things that have brought you joy? What are things that have brought you calm and peace, and accepting that you can have that and that you deserve that. And then taking the steps to actually implement that back into your life, step by step. It doesn't have to be a drastic change, like now we're going to go on date nights every single night. It could be once a month, we go on a date night. And then eventually it becomes once a week. It could be, I'm going to find the local, pool nearby and swim there for 30 minutes a week. I'm going to walk around, take my call that I have, my team meeting call every week. I'll take that on a walk around the block. But it's finding ways to incorporate that stuff back into your life to help relieve your body of that stress that it's feeling ultimately. That's what I'll say. And then there's some other question. Great question here. So Kinsey, I'm not sure if I'm saying these names right, and Danny. Oh my gosh, speaking my language, speaking my life. Okay, so mention, if you manage to handle stress in stressful situations well, how do you handle the stress of others around you so it doesn't affect you?
That's a good one.
The impact of others. Yes, indeed. Okay. This is a much broader topic in terms of even thinking about who do you have around you who's either adding to your burnout, or who's helping you to not be as burned out, and really taking a true, honest stock of that in your life. Okay. And it could be your friend, it could be your family member, it could be your neighbor, but what it could even be, let's say you're renting an apartment, it could be your landlord. Okay. But really being honest about who is it that is adding to your stress and adding to your burnout. Sometimes it's the people you work with. And it feels like you can't get away from them because, if you get away from them, then there's your livelihood. But there are ways to mitigate them, right? There are ways to reduce their impact that they have on your stress levels. What do I mean by that? So for example, back when I was in corporate, I had a terrible boss. This was after I left consulting, went to another role. Company was great. But then the boss, folks, the boss, right? And so the way that I handled that was, for me, it was knowing I essentially ensured that I organized the meetings in a certain way. I made sure that I tried to limit the interactions we had, where it was just enough to get the information I needed to do the work that I need to do, while at the same time ensuring that he was also somewhat of a micromanager. So it's also, okay, he needs to know details and information. Let me ensure I give him that details and information as well. And so it's understanding with each person who you're dealing with, who maybe you feel like you can't get away from them, but they are adding to your stress. Awareness, as we've talked about, really important. But now you got to take action to ensure that you either reduce the time that you're spending with them, or you are able to prepare yourself where okay, I know this person is going to stress me out. I know this person is going to stress me out. I know when I walk into this meeting, I already know what's going to happen. So then ask yourself, what can I do so that it doesn't impact me as much? What can I do? So it's going to vary depending on the person. Maybe you need to do a breathing exercise beforehand. Maybe you need to ensure that you take a 30-minute break after the meeting and you schedule that into your calendar. Okay, but do what you have to do if you are not able to remove yourself from that person or move that person from your life. If you are able to move that person from your life, please do. Please do. Okay, like it's difficult. It is, but if you think about yourself, and I think what Sharon mentioned earlier, right, in terms of how important are you to you? How important is yourself to yourself? And if that person is not adding to you, there's no reason for them to be around you. That's the fact of life. Truth hurts sometimes, but doesn't change the truth. And I know there's another question that Danny wrote, but feel free, Aileen, Sharon, to take that question. He was like, I'm talking a lot.
Yeah, no, that was some great stuff, and I think everyone should kind of ask themselves those questions and take it from there. for sure. The question that, let's see, we had Danny asked was, how can you intentionally avoid burnout when you've been molded into someone that thrives into chaos and feels bored during lulls? Okay, Sharon or Aileen, would you like to take that one?
I'm happy to. So I think there's a difference between so there's the concept of eustress, and a lot of people haven't heard of this before. So it's spelled Eustress. So it's this good stress, and it's when we're pushed outside of our comfort zones, where we're challenged to grow and be maybe thriving in that chaos or surviving that chaos. And we need this to grow personally and professionally. So there's nothing necessarily wrong with that. If that's you, if you feel bored when you're not in that state of good stress, the thing that can push us into burnout is when we experience that chaos as something that turns our bodies into a physiological state of stress. So I'm talking about fight, flight, freeze. If that's what's happening for you when you're in those more chaotic scenarios, you're pushed into the stress state, that when you're chronically in that state is what can lead to burnout. So there's kind of this little subtle delineation there. Are you feeling like, okay, my adrenaline's going, I'm feeling this, but I'm not stressed out. I'm just kind of in the zone. And that's where you can play around. So notice how you respond in your body. And if you are noticing you're pushed into more of that full body reactive mode, then that's where we want to see if we can start to mitigate and bring our stress response down. Which I know all of us can talk about some of those strategies. And that's where we want to be intentional to not continue that state, because that is what leads to burnout. Sharon, I don't know if you wanted to add something, but I'll cut myself off there.
Thank you. One of the things that I've found is that the people who are attracted to chaos at work are the people who grew up with chaos in their childhood at home. And so you're used to it, and we crave the things that are familiar. That's just how our brain works. And so it makes sense why you're in those environments. I guess what I would suggest is figuring out what is the in between from chaos and constant pressure and kind of the stressful life on the one hand, and this boredom on the other. There's got to be some sort of a middle ground, and that's your challenge, is to figure out how to get there, which means that it is a little bit of both. And the other thing I would say is, if you are unable to handle boredom, then that is a challenge in and of itself, because that is something where we're not talking about work that doesn't motivate you or inspire you. We're talking about, a lot of times, boredom for people is when you just don't like to sit in quiet. You don't like to be with yourself without having something to distract you. So if that's the case, then my recommendation is to definitely work on yourself, because there's something that you're escaping, there's something that you're avoiding, and you're looking for that distraction to not sit in that. As an example, I had a client once who did not like to sit with himself, and he worked for this company where he was driving their company car, and the company car, their stereo system was broken. So he's like, that's the thing I hate the most, is getting into the car, because I can't put the radio on and then I have to sit with my own thoughts. And then he was going through all these anxiety and negative thoughts, which, this is why he was looking for the distraction in the first place. So I don't know your exact story, but I would say that these are things to just think about in a new way, perhaps, that maybe it's not comfortable and it's not easy, but maybe that's where the challenge lies, and that's where you stretch yourself a little bit.
And I'll add to that, as someone who definitely did thrive in chaos and felt bored. I'm still going through my own transition of that process, where ultimately it's the idea that you get a sense of accomplishment from figuring something out. So you're like, yes, I did it. But the thing that you figured out, you choose like a very complicated solution, or you essentially keep it in your life when you could have just gotten rid of it. And ultimately what it comes down to is what Sharon was saying, where it is the idea that you can't sit in the calm and peace. Like, you may have had experiences of being calm and peaceful, but it lasts 2 seconds, because immediately you think that you don't deserve the calm. You don't deserve the sense of peace. You don't deserve, and not only that, but it's sort of the idea that if things are calm, there is something that's going to happen. And so there's this anticipation, this worry that something wrong is going to happen. And so then it becomes this self-fulfilling prophecy where you then create the thing that's wrong, and it becomes this whole cycle where you think something's going to happen, so then you create the bad thing that's going to happen, and then you just end up always living in chaos, but always figuring it out, so you feel good about yourself. And then, you know, anything that's calm is considered boredom, and boredom is considered bad. So I know for me, during the last 3 years, I've done work on myself. And so, because this is definitely a much bigger topic than we can solve in this 1 hour webinar, but it's definitely like doing work on myself, including meditation, including doing, like, had a relationship intimacy coach as well too, to help me through all relationships in my life, friends, family, all the things, myself, you know. I went through all these different journeys and realized that what I was doing was I was choosing the chaos over the calm. And I've then transitioned into the state of realizing that things can be easy. Things don't have to be difficult. And when you've grown up in this sense of chaos, and the sense of, you know, okay, you know, how much money do we have for bills? Oh, is there going to be food in the cupboard? Oh, I got to figure it out. OMG, got to figure it out. You tend to get the sense that something bad is always going to happen. You always have to solve for it, instead of realizing that, you know, sometimes it's okay for things to be easy. Sometimes it's not, sometimes, all the time. You can choose ease. You don't have to make things difficult. You don't have to choose difficult. Because sometimes, even when we have the choice of easy versus not so easy, we choose the not so easy. And you got to think about that for yourself. Where are you sometimes choosing the chaos? Right. I was thinking about the example that Sharon mentioned with her client, where she said, every time I go in this company car, the radio doesn't work. Is there an alternate car you can be in where the radio does work? Right. It's not bad that you want to listen to the radio, but perhaps there's another car you can choose where the radio does work. And therefore you don't have to stop. You can stop complaining about the radio not working. Like, it's things like that, where it's choose the easy. It's okay to choose easy. It's okay to choose the calm. It doesn't make you a bad person. It doesn't make you any less worth of yourself. It doesn't make you, you know, not an achiever because you decided to go the easy way. It's okay for things to be easy. I'll leave it at that.
Thank you. That was great. As you all can see in the chat too, it seems like a lot of people are really resonating with this, and this is just such great information. We have a few more questions coming in too on our Q&A, so I'll read some of those out, and then whoever would like to take it, please jump in. So we had someone who asked about time management. So regarding time management and scheduling your personal appointments, how can you better do that if you have to be in the office 5 days a week and have 1 hour drives each way? Ooh, that's definitely a lot of time on the road. Does anyone have any advice on how to juggle that kind of work personal life balance with appointments?
Yes, boundaries. So experience comes from, I was in that corporate space. I had the 1.5 hour commute, actually, because I was living in Oakland, California. Then was commuting to San Francisco, traffic, it's a whole thing. Anyways, had the 1.5 hour commute to from. And for me, I was in the corporate strategy space and helping out a retail company with their billions, all that jazz. Yay. And at some point in time, I then decided to prioritize my work-life balance in terms of prioritizing myself, and realizing that I need to prioritize myself in order to even do a great job for the job. And so the advice I would give is really just one word: boundaries. You hear it a lot in the space of burnout prevention or burnout mitigation, but boundaries, boundaries, boundaries. And what that looks like is really being clear on deadlines, being clear on expectations, being clear on, and when I say that, to say, okay, let's say your boss comes to you and says, hey, we want these sponsorship packages yesterday, you know, or they say we want sponsorship packages. But in your mind, you think everything's urgent, right? In the office, everything seems urgent. Everything needs to be done yesterday. But not done yesterday, then, oh, it's behind. And so as an overachiever, you're thinking to yourself, oh, I need to get this done like now. And so then you stay into the office till 8 p.m. to get it done. You decide you want to bring your laptop home with you to get it done. You do all this stuff, all this extra time in order to get it done, when really your boss probably could have waited until next Thursday. And so what does being clear on deadlines and expectations actually means? It means that when you're saying yes to something, it's not wrong to say yes, but when you're saying yes to something, also clarifying it with the other person who you're saying yes to. Yes, you want the cookies for the bake sale. Well, I can get them to you by Saturday afternoon. Does that work? Or you are looking for sponsorship packages. Right now, I'm working on getting speakers for the event and we're still booking the venue. How does next Tuesday work for you? Or are you looking for all the sponsors to be confirmed? Are you looking for just the packages? What specifically are you looking for? And so it's saying yes, but it's saying yes, but. It's saying yes, but how about this? Does this timeline work? Does this deliverable work? Are you looking for an Excel file or a PowerPoint? Are you looking for a Word document or just like an email with 3 bullet points? Right? Because all those make a difference in how much time and energy that you're putting into the actual task itself. At the end of the day, this is an analogy I'll give in my signature burnout talk, but it's whenever you're saying yes to something or saying no to something, really think about your cup of water, right? You are a cup of water. And as you say yes, you're pouring sips of water into other people's cups. And really thinking about and ensuring that you are filling up your own cup as you do that. And so when you're saying yes to something, you're saying, okay, yes, I'm going to do that. I want to commit to that. But you have to be honest with yourself and say, okay, I'm also doing the speakers thing that's due Friday. And then I have this other event. And then there's this like birthday party for my child on Monday. And then, be honest with yourself with the commitments that you have available and set those boundaries with that other person to say yes. Michelle said yes, and also works well too. Absolutely. The idea is that you don't just say yes and close the door. Like, yes, of course, absolutely, would love to. It's would love to. And how about Thursday? Okay, would love to. And how about I send you a list of criteria by Friday and get those sponsors to you in 2 weeks? Okay, so set those boundaries and ensure that you actually follow those boundaries as well too.
Awesome. Thanks, Vanessa. That was such great stuff about boundaries. And I know we had some other questions that I feel it came in that I think you addressed in that, all about boundaries and how to communicate with coworkers. Kind of following up on that, Aileen, would you like to tell us a little more about how event planners can set some realistic expectations for their clients to help reduce some of that pressure that leads into burnout?
Surely. So I'm loving the chat here because I feel like a lot of people are giving examples of exactly this, setting realistic boundaries, parameters, but throw in the chat if you've ever had something go wrong at an event you've managed or a last minute emergency, something that didn't go according to plan. So I think every single person will say yes. So when I used to work in higher education before having my own business, I used to run a 2-day long 70 events in those 2 days for hundreds of graduate students programming. And it was flying students from Massachusetts to Washington, D.C. And there was a blizzard. I mean, this is just the most dramatic example, but people's flights were getting canceled. It was a whole absolute dumpster fire. And so it's a pretty dramatic example, but we all can relate to, we only can control what we can control. So first things first, it starts internally. It starts with us setting realistic expectations on ourselves, because you can't control the hurricane wedding, the blizzard, whatever it might be, people dropping out, people getting sick, and managing the pressure you put on yourself. And of course, working hard, controlling what you can control, and communicating when these things happen are all things to think about. But we have to start with having our own backs, because one of the surefirest ways to end up in burnout land is kicking yourself when you're down, right? It's having that negative self-talk. And so I'd invite everyone here to think about, if you ever make a mistake too, how do you talk to yourself? Because many of us have this perfectionist mindset. We have this, hey, I can control everything, kind of almost subconscious ticker going. And so I'd invite you to think about and notice how often that's the case for you, and then start to redirect that voice to be a little bit more self-compassionate. There's actually over 2,000 studies. Dr. Kristen Neff is a researcher on one of the leading researchers on the power of self-compassion. And this can be incredibly impactful for preventing burnout, mitigating burnout, and managing the things that could create that extra pressure. And the other part here is thinking about that concept of eustress that I talked about before, is manage that communication, manage that pressure you put on yourself, think about what you can control, do everything within that to set yourself up to have the best event possible. And then at a certain point, notice when you gotta just let go and just manage that communication, and see if you can check in on the nervous system. If you're starting to move from that eustress to fight, flight, freeze, we can start to integrate things that can calm and ground our nervous systems. Because, and I'll wrap up here in a sec so I don't go on and on. I could talk about this alone for a whole hour. But when we start to go into that fight, flight, freeze mode, our executive functioning part of our brain, this prefrontal cortex, it goes offline. So we're in more of this reptilian survival mode, and we can't have creative problem solving and more logical thinking happening at that time. So we're actually going to be better able to help those last minute problems move through any challenges when our nervous systems are in that more grounded state. So Vanessa mentioned breath work. I think both Sharon and Vanessa mentioned meditation, but truly any practices that help you, that most of you probably already know about. There's just that difference sometimes between the knowing and doing. How can you feel like your best self and more grounded and move into your events from that more sturdy state? So those are some of my tips. Think about that pressure you put on yourself, and then the expectations and how you communicate them to your other stakeholders.
And just to
Those are
add to
great.
that,
Yeah.
I would say that, as you guys mentioned, every time you make a plan, like something just doesn't go according to your plan. And so while it's important to make those contingency plans, I think what is even more important is this idea that no matter what happens, I can figure it out. That self-trust, that ability to not freak out and stay calm within the storm is actually the thing that's going to pull you through more so than anything else. So again, this is just a reminder that life is going to be chaotic sometimes, and it's really about your belief about yourself that's going to pull you through.
That, Sharon, leads a little bit into our next question, which I am going to hand off to you, where you said belief about yourself. So changing the direction a bit, some people often feel, like they're not really right person for the role, or even though they are and they have the skills, they kind of have that imposter syndrome feeling going on. Do you have any advice on how people can build some confidence in their career without having those moments of self-doubt?
That is a really, really important question. And so if you are struggling with imposter syndrome, it's really important for you to take a look at what is the belief that you have about yourself. I recently worked with a client who had exactly that. So she was really a rock star in her place of work, but then she got promoted to the next level, and everybody saw the potential in her, but she was freaked out because she'd never done that role before. And I know a lot of times when we get promoted, that's when the imposter syndrome kind of kicks in. And also, something that's really interesting is, because my focus is burnout, a lot of times people come in with their burnout stories, and I can't tell you how many times people have reached the state of burnout because they have imposter syndrome. So what happens when you're in that state is you're constantly in a stress state, because you're constantly worried about being found out, that you're a fraud. You have all these negative thoughts about yourself. You're worried about perception. You're constantly second guessing yourself, and you're spending a lot of energy, mental energy, just constantly like checking and rechecking, and it becomes a little obsessive. I even had a client once that said she was promoted to VP of her company, which is a huge deal. She would spend like an hour before pressing send on an email, because it was going to go company wide. This was once a week, every Monday. And she was just like reading it and rereading it like 8 times. Right. So look at how much energy we're spending on things that aren't really real. Right. They're like these things that just are made up in our heads. So your question was, how do you get to a place of calm from this place? Because imposter syndrome creates so much anxiety. And this is where, again, you have to examine your beliefs. You got to look at the evidence. Like, you're telling yourself a story about yourself, which is, I'm not able to do this. Yeah, I kind of fooled everybody up until now, but they're going to find out tomorrow, and then I'm going to lose my job. So there's a lot of catastrophizing. So you really want to kind of check yourself. Like, what are the stories that you're telling yourself? Are there some unhelpful thinking patterns that you're falling into, like the catastrophizing, right? The prediction about the future. You're kind of caught in a lot of these negative thinking patterns that aren't very helpful. So there's a lot of questions that you can ask yourself to kind of get yourself back online. That's one way to do it. So you might say, where is the evidence, and look for the evidence that you aren't capable of doing your job versus evidence that you are, right? So that's one way to do it. Another is to just kind of ask yourself, what have I done really well, right? And why do people actually have faith in me, right? So maybe taking the other side of the argument. Ultimately, it's about figuring that relationship with yourself out again. And I keep coming back to that, but that's a huge part of the work. Is the inner work is so pivotal to your burnout recovery and burnout prevention. This is why I talk a lot about personality and our own contribution, what we're bringing to the table when it comes to burnout. This is what I talk about on my podcast, Decode Your Burnout, because when you know your burnout type, and by the way, the people who experience imposter syndrome is what I call the thinker. So you're over analyzing things, you're constantly in your head. This is where you're expending so much unnecessary energy and stuck in the negative that you're burning yourself out in the process. The more you understand what your type is, the more you're able to then create a customized recovery solution for yourself. So I think that there are a few different ways that you can come at it. But getting back to my client, like, she went through my entire 3-month burnout program. She came out on the other side, and I asked her, so what's going on with your imposter syndrome? And she's like, no, I don't have it anymore. Right. And it's because during that process, she started thinking differently about herself. So remember, the reason you have the anxiety in the first place is because of a story or because of a thought and a belief. And the reason you're not going to have it at the end of the day is because you've changed the way that you're thinking.
I'm thinking about everything you said. That's such great things. Some of those things even resonate with me, where you talk about like the overthinker, and I'm like, I might do that sometimes, as I'm overthinking right now as I'm talking. Crazy. We have some more questions coming in, a couple in Q&A and a couple in chat. Let's see. So we have one here about someone saying that they love their job. It sounds like they love their role, the creativity they get to do with their clients, but they struggle with some things. This kind of maybe plays a little bit into the imposter syndrome. They know that they're not curing cancer. No one's going to die. So, if they don't finish a task, it's not the end of the world. But of course, the industry runs on deadlines, and they know that. So they're saying that it's tough when their boss wants something done right now or yesterday, and they struggle to talk with their superiors about that without sounding like they're being lazy or, not interested in the opportunity. Does anyone have any?
The question is,
Sure.
well, the scenario is more so is how do you communicate with your leaders about the expectations that you feel should be set?
Exactly. Yes, that's put much better than how I said it. Yeah.
So with that question, I think that definitely connects to what we were talking about like a couple minutes ago in terms of how do you say no and setting those expectations, setting those deadlines. And the fact is that, and some leaders just aren't meant to really be leaders, honestly. But you can't fix that. You can only fix yourself. And you can only control yourself, you can only control what you want to do. And what I would say is, for whoever, asks that question, there's a level of it where it is a level of confidence in yourself and your own ability to get the job done, and being ready. I want to say being ready for a battle, but when you're dealing with these type of leaders, you got to be ready for the battle. And what does that look like? That means, okay, you're going to say, they say they want it, like they literally say, we wanted it yesterday, right? Like that, that's what they're saying. And you know that they also put like 10 other things on your plate. And what happens a lot with these type of leaders is that I do a lot around leadership development and training, all those such things. What happens with these type of leaders is that sometimes they're not aware of all the things that you have to do. And so this is where communication, as someone on a team, as a committee member, as an employee, this is where communication is very important, where you're saying, yes, totally understand we want that deadline. In order to make this happen, is it okay then if I then push out, like, for example, let's say they wanted to have, you to book all the speakers yesterday. They're like, oh, I want all the speakers to be booked yesterday. And at the same time, you're also responsible for the trade show and getting all the exhibitors organized. You're also responsible for ensuring that the catering for the evening gala is set up. You're also responsible for all these other things. And when you're mindful of what's on your plate, you can then say, yes, totally get you. I'm going to work on the speakers as soon as possible. If I do that, that means that I will then not be able to, get all the exhibitors confirmed until next Friday, or I will not be able to, get the gala catering confirmed until 2 weeks from now because we would need to work out the budget more specifically. Does that work for you? Okay. So it's essentially letting them understand and realize what is it like, understand what is it that you have to do that they have already told you have to do, and why then is this new task, this new deadline, a little bit either more difficult for you to handle or just a little more challenging relative to everything else you have to going on, right? But in order to do that, you also have to be clear and aware of all the stuff that you have going on as well too. And Brooke mentioned it's hard of being a one-person team. That is very true. It is very hard to be in a one-person team. And so then you're looking at time management and productivity tools as well too, which we can, definitely go into. I think Aileen just put in the chat with someone else, just pasted as well too, scheduling Slacks, all the things. But ultimately, if you are on a one-person team or a two-person team or something that's like a really small team, then you're not dealing with this problem where you have someone else telling you everything was due yesterday. But most of the time what's happening is you're telling yourself that everything was due yesterday. Okay. And so then we go into what are the things that you're telling yourself, and the overthinking and the overachieving and the perfectionism, right? Where you're telling yourself that it's due yesterday. Well, realize that because you're a one-person team or a two-person team, you're really the only person telling yourself that. Because I've planned many events, big and small, and you are the project manager of that event. So you are the one setting the timeline and the deadlines for things. You are the one, maybe someone gives you the budget, perhaps, right? Someone else is giving you the budget, but you're the one scheduling and setting the timeline and setting the deadlines and deciding when or when not to respond to people or who needs what by when. That you are in charge of that. And so really look at, for yourself, look at this calendar, look at the timeline, look at the project plan that you developed and see, okay, maybe I was overachieving when I thought that I could book all the speakers by yesterday. And perhaps I need to give myself some grace, right? Give myself some breathing room and understand that I booked all the speakers yesterday, but we have 5 out of the 6, only one needs to be confirmed. That's okay. It will happen, taking these steps. All right, moving on to the next thing. So it's a lot of the self-talk as well that Sharon was mentioning, right? It's what are you telling yourself that is leading you to believe that everything was due yesterday?
So it sounds like you can have your full plate, you can keep it full, but you can't pile on, you have to switch things out. And then once you take something off, you can add the next task. So
yes,
prioritize.
Exactly. But it's also being aware of that. So what I call, like what I tell people, I call the success schedule. And a success schedule, not necessarily something where it's, okay, minute by minute, hour by hour, I know what I'm going to do when and by whom. That's not what we're trying to do here. But the idea is understanding, okay, what are your, I tell people, top 3 priorities, top 3 goals in your personal and your business life is all one, because you are all one. So it's all one. But your personal and your business, your top 3 priorities, understanding that, and then mapping it out in like a week by week form where you understand, okay, what are things that are due, knowing that I said that they're due, but also being flexible and realizing that life happens, as we've talked about earlier on this webinar. Life happens, things happen. You can't control everything. Okay. You may want a speaker to respond to you by email on Monday, but hey, they might be on vacation. And so they won't be able to respond to you by Thursday. You cannot control that. And so it's realizing that there's some things you can't control, but things that you can control, take ownership of that, make the right decision, decide what you want to take off your plate, decide what you can do, decide that, what actually needs to be perfect versus what can just be great, good enough, almost perfect. Doesn't have to be perfect, almost perfect, and still great, still amazing.
Perfect. Good. That's such great information to know. Thank you for sharing that. We are coming up on time already, and so many questions we didn't even get to, and thank you all for adding some into the Q&A chat. We'll be doing a recap article that will come out next week. So we'll see if we can get some of those extra questions answered in there as well. But before we leave, I'd like to just ask all of our speakers one last question on what is a resource that you would suggest and like to share with our audience that could help them to further explore the topic of preventing burnout. And Aileen, I'll start with you.
So I have two resources. One is kind of holistic and one is very specific. So for anyone wanting to learn more about burnout, prevention, recovery, all of it, one of my favorite books is Burnout: The Secret to Unlocking the Stress Cycle by the Nagoski sisters. And we kind of flirted with some of the nervous system supportive tools in this conversation today, but that book, it's a fun read. It's really, really informative and all evidence-based. So I definitely recommend that. Then the other resource I have is, I'd be curious in the chat, if you have trouble sleeping the night before a big event, or if sometimes you wake up in the middle of the night and the to-do list starts going, you have trouble going back to sleep, I have a tool, it's a yoga nidra guided meditation. So it's a form of non-sleep deep rest. Essentially, you can use this any time of day, but you can also use it if you have trouble falling asleep. It helps your body feel like it's recovered lost sleep. So of course we want to do what we can do to try to get quality sleep, but this is a nice little supportive strategy for those nights when, you know, the mind wins. And it's also, someone mentioned in the chat before, meditation can feel hard to access. This is a guided body relaxation that alone walks you through how to get that nervous system back to a more grounded state.
Awesome, thank you. And so we have some links too that we'll be putting in the chat as we're talking right now. And again, all of these will be shared in our recap article too, if you missed them right now. But Sharon, could you please share a resource with us as well?
Yeah, I actually have two resources. I actually built a toolkit for event organizers, and I will put the link to that in the chat. So that's answering some of the most common questions that you guys have and providing some stress related techniques that you can use. And in addition, I also will put in the chat, I'm doing a webinar on, it's not sure if it's next Wednesday or the following, but all the information and registration info will be on that LinkedIn invite. So do click the links in the chat and you'll be able to join me. It's a free webinar just for you guys.
Awesome. And Vanessa, do you have a resource that you'd like to share with us and talk about as well?
Yes, happy to. So this is called a productivity breakthrough session. And so what I do in this session is I help it's for anyone, so professionals, entrepreneurs, students, so anyone who is in that state where you feel like you just don't know everything that you have on your plate. You feel as though you are always confused and running 15 miles per second, and you're looking to really map out your career and life, but you're really looking to map out what your success schedule actually is. Then the productivity breakthrough session is what's going to be most helpful for you. You're welcome to check that out. And I think the link's in the chat somewhere. But yeah, pretty much it's just an experience for you to get tools, strategies, and mindset that you need to skyrocket your productivity and regain control of your life.
Well, thank you all so much, Aileen, Sharon, Vanessa. This was awesome. There was such amazing information here. I know personally I'm going to be implementing some of the suggestions you guys gave into my personal life, and I can't wait to see how it helps with some of my stressors that go on. So thank you all very much, and thank you to everybody who attended.